Good evening, everybody. This is episode 10 of whatever we're calling these things. But we're going to talk about boundary setting tonight, which is spicy. So let me bring in my collaborator, Jenn White from Bright Futures Families.
Hello.
Hello, nice background.
The sunset is especially lovely today, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a little bit still peeking through of the red and orange, and then
Yes. Yeah. I do love. We're up on a hill, and so it's lovely to get to see especially this time of year.
very nice. Well, I've got my glasses on, which are reflecting light, which is not nearly as pretty as the sunset, but
It's all right. It'll just turn black in a second anyway, so no, it won't look any different to anybody else. So,
hello, how are
I
you?
love you said it was
Oh,
spicy for today. So, yeah, I'm a little nervous, quite honest.
it is. I was just trying to think of what are all the different boundaries that get set, and also within the agency context, there's some boundaries that agencies help
Yeah.
people set and maybe suggest as areas for boundaries to be set. And then there's others that sort of the parties are left to figure out on their own, depending on what feels right for them. Where should we begin?
I I let's let's begin on let's begin at the beginning, I guess, right? Because I think that's the best place to start. It's when people are most excited and tend to drop their boundaries most easily, which becomes the scariest part, right? Is because
Yeah.
then they have that's never going to happen to me. Everything is going to be perfect and beautiful and wonderful. And they forget to set those boundaries.
Hmm.
So, how do you, as a program, and I apologize to anybody's watching. My dog is unhappy, so I just need to pick her up. She's going to join us.
It's
Um,
okay. We're also Jen. I don't think anybody's hearing any noises she's making. So,
That's all right. She needs some love, so she's just gonna sit on my lap. So if anybody needs to know, this is Pickles. She's
oh,
so but boundaries at the beginning, right? Right. I think that's one of the big things that agencies can really help with.
hmm.
Because you forget to say, oh, I'm sorry, did somebody else just say shut Pickles? Sorry. Again, she's she is a very old lady. She is 16 years old and deaf and blind, so she doesn't even know that she's making noise most of the time. So, um, yeah, so it's really incumbent on
Yeah.
the agency to kind of have that conversation early and do the what would you do ifs. And I see that a lot in a lot of especially if you watch people in the surrogacy groups and things like that, that they are going, hey, I did not, I didn't know I needed to do this, or I didn't know somebody could overstep that boundary, especially when it comes to medical decision making
Hmm.
and things that people are really are really simple, like going to doctor's visits. So
Yeah.
how do you start that conversation, and when do you start that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to start there too with sort of the questions of bodily autonomy. I think some of it gets set, as you were saying early on, in that you try to have really extensive conversations with both sides about not just termination and selective reduction and the type of relationship they want and vaccines and some of the things that everybody sort of knows to talk about, hopefully, and to make sure that those are reflected in the way that you're matched and in the match itself, and then get enshrined later on. But
Right.
also even labor and delivery preferences, it sounds so far off when you are sitting here and you're just building out a profile and talking to the agency about what you're
And
looking for in a match, and
especially
yet
for parents who have experienced so much failure, right? Like they really think it's never going to happen. And so therefore, why would I even need to talk about that boundary around that?
exactly. But I'm sure you have been in the situation of, one party wanting an induction and the other party really wanting to go into labor naturally. I mean, I guess I'm sort of tipping
Mhm.
my hand in that scenario, but But the opposite too. Sometimes surrogates are like, I am very much done being pregnant. I'm full term. I would like to be induced. I've, maybe experienced an induction before. It helps me schedule my entire life around like knowing that I'm going to the hospital on this day. And maybe the parents are just concerned, like, oh, well, it's like you're not due for another week, and like, why wouldn't we just wait? And so, I mean, it can definitely happen both ways, but that's just one example of like the surrogate is pregnant, and yet there are always risks, even if very, very small risks, of like that next day that the baby is still inside. There's also risks related to induction or an earlier delivery. And so you have competing preferences potentially where both sides are in the right and in the wrong and all of it, right? And so
Right.
like trying to talk, you know, 14 months before that delivery date to
Yeah.
be like, is this a thing that matters to you? Are you going to want her to be electively induced at 39 weeks? And then for her, like, is induction a thing that you're trying to avoid, that you want to schedule? So like we're
Right.
just giving one example, but like bodily autonomy comes up all the
Right.
time
Or,
with different procedures
or
and
which partner, if there happens to be a C-section, like who do you want there? Because a lot of times the hospitals will only allow one person, right? Like
right.
those are boundaries as far as like where your comfort level is on things. I I mean, outside of medical, I mean, I will say delivery is a huge like boundary. Like, who do you want
Yeah.
in there when you're laboring? Are you going to be comfortable? Do you want somebody? Are you going to allow people to be down where they can see everything? Do you only want people by your head? Are you going to allow a photographer in the room? A
Yeah.
videographer? Like, where are your boundaries there? Um, but even during like the actual pregnancy, like boundaries on appointments.
Hmm.
So, like, are you going to allow the parents to come into the room? I definitely have had a situation where the carrier really wanted to have just a little bit of time with the OB privately before the
Yep.
parents were allowed to come in. And that was really hard for the parents. They did not understand that boundary because they thought, that she was trying to lock out or do something sneaky. And she just
Yeah.
really needed a little bit of private medical time with her own provider, is what it really came down to. And so that wasn't communicated very well with them at the beginning. And so it led to a lot of misunderstandings later as they went on down the line.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think there's always a natural like suspicion, like, well, if we're being kept out of something, like what is she discussing with her provider that we don't know about? But it could be something like just slightly embarrassing that like it's not pertinent to the well-being of the baby, and she just
Right.
like
Like
doesn't want to
I
talk
have
about
hemorrhoids. I have whatever. I mean,
right.
whatever embarrassing, horrible pregnant. I mean, there's so many embarrassing things about pregnancy, right? Like
Right.
I do not want to be talking about that with intended parents, right? Like all those things.
It's like
So
we have a great relationship, but we don't have that relationship.
exactly. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
Pickles doesn't want that relationship with us either, so she's
she
off.
wants whatever relationship she wants in the exact second she wants it. That's just that is the joy of being an old dog. So, the other one, I mean, outside of medical autonomy, is communication boundaries, right? And I think this can go for communication with intended parents and gestational carriers and with agencies as well.
Sure.
Because agencies really, we take the brunt of a lot of communication and miscommunications in there.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to, I once was approached and I did not help match them. They ultimately went somewhere else. But I was approached by parents who said that they only would match with a gestational carrier who would communicate with her every single time she hit any waypoint in her life. Meaning, if she was leaving the house, they wanted her to text to say she was leaving the house. They wanted her to text when she arrived at her location. They wanted her to text when she was leaving for the next location. And that was the need for a big boundary. And I attempted to set that boundary and that expectation with them, and they didn't like my boundary and expectation that I set. And so they ultimately went somewhere else. And I really hope that somebody was able to convince them of an appropriate boundary in that regard.
Hmm.
But how quickly do you respond? How do you communicate best, right? A lot of surrogates are really busy parents. And if you send them an email, they may check their email once a week. And, so if you're expecting a response really quickly, that's not going to happen. Same with texting, though. They're busy, they're taking care of their children. They may not be able to text you back immediately or answer the phone right in this second. So,
Yeah.
like, setting that boundary regarding appropriate levels of communication, while also absolutely understanding that parents are very anxious about this, right? Like, this is somebody carrying their heart outside their body. Similarly with agencies, right? Like, what are the boundaries as to when they should be responding? Do they respond at all hours? I would generally say, unless there's an emergency, hopefully people are respectful of those boundaries. But I have had times where people have sent me an email that they've decided was something that was emergent on a Saturday night. And I thought, nothing has changed in the last day that has made this an emergency, a Saturday night emergency. So it's like you have to set those boundaries too, because we as agency personnel also have lives. I mean, I think I call this, it's a lifestyle job, what we do. Like, we never actually turn
It's like,
off.
do we have
No, but
lives
I mean,
there?
yeah,
No.
right, right, right. But like, we never actually fully turn off. But
Yeah.
also, we do have like families that we care for and that we love and we want to spend time, uninterrupted time with as well. So it's like
Mhm.
those boundaries are important too.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I so feel what you just said about like agencies bearing the brunt. There's also obviously circumstances in which we want to bear the
Correct. And
brunt,
that's and
right?
that's
So,
exactly and that's
you know,
exactly right. Yeah, we want to be the one so that they're not taking it out on each other. I would rather be the punching bag. I mean,
yeah,
it stings. I
always.
hate being the punching bag, right?
I know.
Because emotionally, you have to like learn to compartmentalize it. But
Yeah.
I don't want them to punch at each other. I would
Yeah.
rather them absolutely come after me.
Yes, that's right. So I think there's a lot of cases in which like the boundary setting ends up being routed through the agency as a way of helping to preserve the relationship between the two of them.
Mhm.
And even like a simple one, which is not about bodily autonomy, but I think you, like we do, like the parties are in touch from the moment they match, like they have each other's contact information,
Right.
and yet for a big chunk of the time between match and transfer, they are in contracts. And so they each have legal counsel and they're negotiating things and drafts are getting passed back and forth.
Right.
So it's not that we want to be controlling of the way that they communicate with each other. But if one party is bringing up like contract provisions to the other,
Right.
if the other party has the good sense to say like I'm not really comfortable like doing this directly because we both have lawyers, that's a perfect example of like the agency stepping in and without sort of even necessarily revealing that they know can just be like, hey, by the way, I don't know if I
How
forgot
are
to
things
mention,
going?
but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
during contracts, like you guys are free to chat, but I would, based on our experience, like really suggest that you don't discuss anything about the contract and leave that, to be routed through your attorneys. So it's like a boundary I'm very happy to just like step in and set so that it doesn't have to be like even awkward between them. Like, I don't want to discuss this. They can just be like, oh, the agency suggested that we don't, blah, blah,
We
blah. And
try
I'm
to
like,
set
great.
that one we set that one in advance for everyone. I will
Yeah.
also say that a lot of times people don't realize that as agencies, we have boundaries that we need to observe in regard to that same thing, right?
Yeah.
It is not our job and it's very intentional. Like, we don't step away completely, but we take a big step back when everybody's in legal, because I never want anybody to say that I'm influencing or pushing one way or the other. I want their legal counsel to be representing them and them to feel very confident in that. That said, if there are times when legal counsel says, hey, we're not getting there, is there something that we're missing? I have said, hey, bring it back. We'll come in and we will help through that. And we'll pull it out of legal completely. We will say legal has stopped at this point in time. Like, you can come back to the agency. We'll have a negotiation together about this issue, and then I will send back what it was, right? But we are not there to be part of that. And I know some agencies do feel like they should be part of that. And
Yeah.
I feel really strongly that your legal representation should not, I mean, should only represent you, not me as the agency.
Yeah. No, 100%. This this may have come up today in one of my cases.
Everything happens every day, I think, is what it is for
I
all of
know.
us, right?
It's true. It's like, oh, funny you should say, but
Yeah,
that's kind of yes. But bodily autonomy is one that like definitely comes
that's
up again and
that's a
again
huge
when it
one.
comes to
Yeah.
boundaries, because it's also like even more than social media or the way you communicate. It's the most deeply personal one. It's sort of, I think, the one um, that also like tends to unfairly tarnish the reputation of surrogacy sometimes, that bodily autonomy was not respected, or that intended parents didn't understand, were not understanding of a boundary that the surrogate set, but vice versa, like it's their child, and there's certain uh, like obligations that any good surrogate has to making sure the intended parents are clued into everything that relates to the health and well-being of their child. And so there's always that push pull and boundaries that need to be set in both directions too, that like intended parents do have access to medical information, and to be able to just understand what's going on when their
Yeah.
child is being gestated potentially halfway across the country.
And and it can be really hard for parents to understand and I mean this is actually a legal boundary that yes, they can talk to the medical provider, but it can be very difficult for them to access that medical provider outside of the presence of the
Yeah,
gestational carrier because she is the
he's
patient.
the patient.
And that can sometimes be a very difficult
Right.
boundary for parents to
Yeah.
accept.
Even practically, like she may have signed every single disclosure, authorization, like HIPAA form, like up the wazoo, but like getting a doctor, a very busy OB or midwife who has a very bustling practice and, is only spending 10, 15 minutes at best in the room with their patients, to also set aside time to make a call to somebody that isn't their patient, that they cannot bill for that time typically, like not to be cynical, but we all know the US healthcare system. Like that is a really tough ask. And so it's not that you're being intentionally kept out of the loop. It's that practically speaking, the system is not set up to count you in the equation the way they do the
And
surrogate, their patient.
and some practices just have that boundary that they won't do those things, regardless of if the gestational carrier is like, I would love for them to talk directly. Like
Right.
some of them
Don't
just
make me the
won't.
conduit. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, and so unfortunately, like some of those boundaries are enforced by people outside as well. And that can make it, I think those are the hardest ones that like I as an agency deal with. Will make them do it. That's your job. And I said, I can't make a medical professional talk to you as a parent, unfortunately. I would love to, but I can't because that is that's outside of my scope of, I mean, of ability for one, but
Yeah.
it's their boundary and they are holding that. And so if there's nothing I can do to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a rough one. I mean, the communication example you gave me, which is pretty wild, about like every time she leaves the house, texting an update.
That was quite a conversation. I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't think that's a very reasonable request.
I would echo what you said, which is I think maybe the most common statement I get from surrogates when we talk about like communication relationship is even from the ones that like are like, I would love to make a friend out of this and I wanted them to be there for everything and I'm like an open book, might also say, hey, I have 4 kids. Hey, I work a night shift as a nurse and I'm sleeping during the day. Like, hey, I'm, XYZ. Like, they're just going to have to understand that, like, I may not respond to their text that quickly and I
Right.
will get back to them and they will,
It
like,
doesn't mean
yeah,
anything's
I'm
wrong. It
I'm an
doesn't mean
open
anything's
book. I
things. Yeah.
just, yeah, it's just like my life is not set up that way. And I understand. I have like unread texts that I need to respond to from like weeks ago.
Right.
uh,
I, I,
and
I definitely also, I will say like relationships are organic. And so another way sometimes that it can be an issue is if that relationship changes and suddenly somebody needs to set a new
yeah,
boundary, that can be very difficult. If they started with that's why I said, like, sometimes everybody starts on that place of innocence. Like, we're all gonna love each other. It's gonna be amazing, the most amazing thing that's
Mhm.
ever happened. But what if something doesn't happen? And what if somebody oversteps and then suddenly it's like, oh, I need to set a boundary because of that overstep that happened,
Yeah,
right? And that can happen too. And it can be really difficult on both sides, right? Because and it can go either, it can happen either way.
sure.
Generally, it tends to happen more that gestational carriers are pushing and setting a new boundary, but it
Yeah,
can happen both ways. And it can be really, really difficult emotionally for those parents,
yeah.
because suddenly you had hoped to have everything.
Right. And
Um,
now, like, it feels like a wall's going up. It might not actually be a wall, but like it feels like a way in which you're being sort of kept from, being as much a part of this as you wanted to be.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even simple things like, maybe you go into this like thinking, okay, like every Sunday night we'll have like a weekly cadence of chatting, and like that can work well, just
Mhm.
like have it on the books, but like maybe it gets to be too much. And then somebody has to be like, ooh, like maybe every other week, or maybe like we switch from it being scheduled to it being a little bit more spontaneous because like I'm having trouble carving out the time,
Right.
every weekend. And it's not that I don't want to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. It's just,
Right. And
um,
I've had that
yeah,
happen where they had a something set and then some boundaries were put in place and thought, well, with these new boundaries, we're all very uncomfortable with that set schedule.
yeah,
And I mean, there are ways. I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about like tips and tricks and kind of the advantage of having an agency and what we can do to help in that regard.
hmm,
Like that. I mean, I think one, communication early and often is extraordinarily important, right? Like,
yep,
have those conversations, have expectations, conversations with the understanding that things can change. And if they do change, to lean on the agency. And I mean, I've definitely said, like, gone in and drawn a line and said, hey, y'all are having trouble. Like, let's make sure that we only communicate via a group text, or
that's
like
right.
if we want to see each other via video, like it's a Zoom video all together, just so that there's a neutral third party in the middle between all of you while you're communicating. And
Yep,
I have gone so far as to telephonically attend every single medical appointment for that reason, and have gone to gone to births, because like it just really, everybody needed
yeah.
some boundaries.
Yeah. And like even when it's not as extreme as that, like there's always a milestone around the corner that can be a sort of reset. Where like it's great, like great, you've graduated to your OB, like why don't we get a group call and talk about like expectations for like the next whatever? Like
Right.
great, we're out of the first trimester, like we're gearing up to, start parentage, we're doing birth planning. Like there's almost always like something around the corner that can be used as a sort of like let's get back on the same page kind of milestone where like agency can sort of step in if things feel like maybe they're getting a little bit off the rails, and maybe then from that point forward we are involved at sort of every stage through a group text thread, through joining up appointments and facilitating everything in a really hands-on way. Maybe that conversation is sort of enough for them to then start off on this new path together without needing as much involvement. So that's the hope.
We have actually a really great question
Yeah,
down in the comments. Is there are times
please.
when the gestational carrier is more zealous than the intended parents, and the boundary setting goes the other way? And yeah,
Yes, a
yeah,
hundred
it
percent.
happens. It absolutely
Yeah,
happens. And it can definitely, like it really comes down to a communication mismatch, is what I really think happens in a
yeah,
lot of those situations. Um, I mean, it tends to happen more if somebody is a little more local, right? Like just that, or somebody is just like badgering, right? Like, I haven't heard from you. 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 Like, good, okay, just same thing. Give a break. Let
yeah,
everybody have to, even if parents don't have children yet, they still have careers and outside life and friends and other things that may make it so that they can't respond immediately. And in those situations, I've definitely heard people go, well, how are they going to have a baby, which takes all this time, if they don't have unlimited time for me? And I'm like, well, they're you have to remember what your life was before you had children too, right? So
Mhm.
and how, and that the moment that switch flips, like as soon as they come, like you switch into the new mode.
Yep, yep. And that's really like their job to figure out, right?
Right.
Like, but right now, they may be working two jobs to be able to afford this very
Right.
process and be set up to welcome this child into their house. And that may be part of why they're so busy. Or like on the flip side, like maybe they're just like getting in the last trip that they will take for the foreseeable future. And like we can't
Right.
really begrudge them being able to take a little vacation because so many people while pregnant take a baby moon. So like
Correct.
it's not personal. It's just that like they're seizing this last opportunity. It doesn't mean they're any less committed to you, involved in this pregnancy, excited, etc. So yes, but yes, it happens. It certainly happens.
It definitely happens, most especially when you have the gestational carrier who goes into the with the I want a bestie forever mindset, and then
Hmm.
they become very disappointed that they don't become besties with their intended parents.
Yeah.
I also will say, like, the boundary after delivery, it goes to that as well, right?
Yeah.
Like the how much contact do you want to have with each other afterwards is a huge boundary to talk about in advance, and one that can be really shocking with the reality of it,
Hmm.
because a lot of times parents go into this very, like, wide-eyed, like, yes, I will 100%, I will continue to speak and text and, with you at the same cadence that I did before. And then they have a newborn,
Yep.
and then they realize how much time a newborn takes. And suddenly you now have a gestational carrier who says, you are not responding to me in the same way that you would set your expectation that you would. And they get very upset. And it's like, then where does that boundary lie in that communication?
Yeah. For sure. And I think like even in good scenarios, it sort of can tail off a little bit.
Yeah.
It's when it's particularly abrupt that I
Yes.
think is like the toughest part for both sides. That like there's been a lot of excitement leading up to delivery. Maybe you were camping as intended parents, you were camping out locally and spending a lot of really quality time even before the child is born, like just like going to the zoo, doing whatever.
Right.
And then, you have this great moment. You like have all of these exchanges of like gratitude in the hospital, and then you go home and it's like, okay, well, the surrogate has to adjust to like the now what feeling of just like, oh my God, like everything is just like
Yeah.
over, even
The
if it's
center
not
of my
over, like
world
it's over.
changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then the intended parents, like there's a little bit of a natural out of sight, out of mind kind of thing where like, yeah, I think initially they're sending some photos, but they're really absorbed with being first time parents or juggling a toddler and a baby or whatever their situation is, and it's really tough.
And
um yeah.
it made me think of, yeah, another boundary that I've definitely seen people shift on the fly and cause hurt is access to the baby right after birth.
Hmm.
Because I think every gestational carrier kind of has that, like, I really hope I get to spend some time. Sometimes promises are made in advance, regardless of whether or not you get to have, like, time with the baby, a certain amount of time with the baby, and
Yeah.
whether the children get to meet the baby for closure, which I mean
Yeah.
is wonderful, but sometimes life happens, right? Like, and
Mhm.
sometimes, either hospital policies happen, or, like, the carrier said, well, my kids were sick last week, and suddenly now these parents have an absolute, what germs are they carrying, like things that they hadn't thought of when they made
Yeah.
those promises
Right.
suddenly change their boundary and what they're willing to take and what they're willing to do, and that can be really difficult to deal with that shift.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think part of good birth planning, which Childbirth Allies is
I
on the
said they just
line.
came
Good.
on, we could talk to
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
just coincidental. So if we want to talk about good birth planning, talk to them. But part of it is like setting the expectation that like while we're going through this massive birth planning exercise together and we're talking through like who's going to be in the hospital and have they received the Tdap shot, and can we, like, after the intended parents get the golden hour, can the surrogate spend some time with the baby, and all of these things, like knowing that not everything is necessarily going to go to plan, in the same way that labor and delivery is not necessarily going to go to plan. Even the aftermath, like kid could be in the NICU, and then if they're discharged, maybe they have to go straight to the airport and get home instead of being able to stop by the surrogate's house to
Or
do the kid. The
global
kids might be at school. Like, you just don't know what
global
is going to
pandemics
happen,
happen, right? Like
right?
they change everything. I definitely I thought it was a very sweet the birth I had to go attend because unfortunately everything wasn't so wonderful between all the parties.
Yeah,
The parents were still kind enough to say, hey, we understand that your children at least want to see the baby.
yeah.
And the hospital was so lovely and so accommodating. And because they were worried about germs, they actually brought the baby into the nursery on the other
Nursery
side.
behind the glass.
And so then the parents, so the gestational carrier and her husband, could actually hold their children, talk about the baby, and that this was the baby. So then they got to
Yeah,
lay eyes on the baby and see. So that
yeah,
sometimes there are other ways. And again, like I helped work with the hospital to come up with that plan so that we could make everybody comfortable, right? And still have that boundary of them being nervous about the germs, but also allow that gestational carrier and to allow some closure for her family.
yeah. Um, we are just over the half-hour mark. I will say there's a whole host of things we didn't even talk about. We didn't talk about diet and lifestyle
Oh
and
my
cleaning
goodness. Cleaning
products and all of that.
products.
Yep. We
Oh,
did.
my favorite one was a parent who said you can't touch receipts. That was,
They have like BPA or the whatever, the receipt
how do you
paper
live
has,
life
and
though, right? It's
I
like,
know. I know. Yeah, and endocrine disruptors. I
oh,
mean, just I guess wear gloves or get like an emailed receipt. I don't know. Social media and privacy generally.
yep.
Um, Religion and politics. Right.
Hmm.
If we really want to talk spicy and boundaries, like
That might be a whole nother conversation.
right. But you're together for a year plus of your lives, and world events happen, and I think most people kind of avoid it, or maybe they're ideologically aligned, but it's
Yep.
yeah, so
Yep.
we might have to do a part
I,
two.
I agree. We might need to bump whatever's next week or next in 2 weeks and do a continuation on this one.
Okay, okay, we can do pumping and breastfeeding, which is one I
Oh,
might have to
also another boundary.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Staying in each other's houses, that sometimes comes up.
I have a spicy story about that one
Yeah.
though. Yeah. Okay.
Gift giving and boundaries around that.
Mhm.
So we've got a lot to do. All right, we'll do a part two. It
Okay.
is it's written in the stars. Just like Colleen, the part of the moon that is now inscribed in history. A pleasure as always. I'm gonna send you an
Always.
email after this. I have other thoughts for you. But
Excellent. All right.
all right.
Sounds good. I'll
Take
talk to
care,
you soon.
everyone. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.